They're gloriously saved. You don't have to spend 45 minutes getting them lost. That's unnecessary. Why would you do that? Why take them backwards? Don't walk them back into the tomb. They're already out of the tomb. Instead, start to see God's people as a bunch of people who are new creations, but some of them are stumbling because their feet are still wrapped up in the grave clothes that they walked out of the tomb with. Some of them aren't using their hands because their hands have been locked to their sides, unable to be able to stretch their arms. Some of them can't see properly because they have a face cloth over them, and they can't speak properly because their mouths are filled up with whatever that shame or guilt or condemnation or baggage that they're dragging, and their ears are clogged and they can't hear. You don't have to spend time trying to get saved people lost so you can validate the gospel. Just reach out and grab hold of the grave clothes of resurrected people and pull. Come on. And if you reach out and grab hold of the grave clothes of a resurrected person and pull, you might release that piece of grave cloth. You may not release all of them, and you may not be able to release much of it, but if you can just do a little bit to release people. And so that was transformational in my ministry when he finally got through my thick skull. You don't know how to raise Lazarus from the dead, so stop trying. But I'm going to start to show you how to reach out and pull on people's grave clothes. And so now I say to people that the ministry that I feel the Lord has given us is to evangelize the evangelized, to speak to God's children, as an under-shepherd looking at sheep who's had their furs matted and full of thorns and thistles and has fallen off into the wayside, to grab hold of those sheep and pull a little bit of the grave clothes off. And so I say in a nutshell, our ministry is to pull grave clothes off of resurrected people. And I believe you've been resurrected into a new reality in Christ, that Jesus is Lord and that He's Lord of your life. But I see restrictions on God's people. I see God's people unable to walk in the freedom and the liberty that has been given to them. And so I want to proclaim to you tonight, be loosed and be let go, because it's what Jesus says at Lazarus' grave, to loose people and to let them go. And we have what I consider now the highest honor in the world. It is the highest honor in the world to speak to God's people, release into the liberty that's been paid for them by Jesus. This is not a mental release. This is not just a religious release. This is not on par with some sort of psychedelic experience. I'm not talking about grabbing hold of you emotionally and stimulating some emotion inside of you so that you're weepy or you get goosebumps or that you laugh or that you cry. All of that may happen, but that's person to person. Some people have that on the edge at all times, and other people aren't that way at all. There are introverts in the room and there are extroverts in the room. There are some who like to laugh and there are some who don't. And the Father, He knows all of us. This is not about us coming into some common experience that when we come together, we all get the exact same thing out of the exact same preachers. It's not about discovering that we all like the exact same songs or that we like the exact same way to worship. None of those things. What it is being released into being a unique, beautiful individual that's created in the likeness and the image of God. And when those grave clothes start to come off, you will notice that some of the things that are exposed are so unique and so different from the crowd, and that becomes a little difficult for some of us. And I've also noticed that as the grave clothes are removed in my own life, I have found ample time and way to put new grave cloths on. I'd like to think that as I've been released into a guilt-free, shame-free, condemnation-free existence and walking in the liberty of the Father, I'd like to think that the grave clothes are falling off right and left. And I can tell you that they are, because I can point back to some things and go, I was in bondage there, and I was in bondage there, and I was in bondage there, but I've also put a few more on. Because sometimes we get so comfortable being where we are, it's sort of like laying under a blanket. And we don't want to get out of that blanket because it's nice and warm and we're nice and cozy. And I think in some respects, even our grave clothes have become that way, to where it's become a little bit easier to just be restricted than it is to be free, because freedom is frightening and freedom is scary, and freedom will cause people to do things that other people may not like. I've also found that sometimes if we're not doing a good job putting on grave clothes, our neighbor knows how to wrap us up in some grave clothes as well, because our neighbors get tired of our liberty. How many of you know freedom's dangerous? Liberty's dangerous. If you set people free, they may not do the stuff you like. That might become offensive to you. That might bother you. That is the danger of a democracy. It's the danger of living in a land full of liberty. Because what happens when you get an ideology opposed with somebody else believes something you don't like? What happens when they get the same rights to believe it that you have? Well, that's awful. They shouldn't be able to believe that and feel that way. Well, welcome to freedom. Because in freedom, and we ought to be in defense of other people completely disagreeing with us. Look, I think it's okay to say, look, I think you're wrong. I think your ideas are horrible, but I'd die for your right to have them. Because that's liberty. And that's freedom. And without you having your rights, why should I have any of my own rights? Now, why should your rights trample mine, and why should your ideas be held as more important or more valid than mine? We got to have that in the church, because if we're free people and we're full of liberty, then we need to walk in that liberty.